NPR, or National Public Radio, receives $90 million of federal tax money each year. On February 22, 2011, two citizen journalists posed as Muslims and visited with two of the top senior executives at NPR, Ron Schiller, president of the NPR Foundation and senior vice president of development for NPR, and director of NPR's institutional giving, Betsy Liley. The two reporters said their names were Amir Malik and Ibrahim Qassam, members of Muslim Education Action Center, a Muslim Brotherhood Front Group.
Hi there, I'm Betsy Liley. Nice to meet you. Hi, Ron Schiller. Betsy Liley, nice to meet you.
On the MIAC website, it said the organization sought to, quote, spread the acceptance of Sharia across the world.
Really? That's what they said? So they actually tried.
They all met at Georgetown's Cafe Milano in Washington, D.C. The reporters posing as Muslims explained they were interested in making a $5 million donation to publicly run media.
So we have set aside, I believe, something like $5 million for, we're partly out of concern for the defunding process that the Republicans are trying to engage in.
A stretch limo was provided as transportation to the NPR senior executives by the Muslim Brotherhood Front Group. While they further explained their connection to the Muslim Brotherhood, Ron Schiller proceeded to talk about why NPR would be better off in the long run without federal funding. He talked about the Tea Partiers, Christians, Zionists, uneducated Americans, and even Juan Williams.
So, you asked about our organization, and we contribute to a number of Muslim schools, Orthodox Muslim schools across the U.S., and more recently we contributed to some universities. And, so our organization was originally founded by a few members of the Muslim Brotherhood in America, actually.
But I think it's, I think what we all believe is that if we don't have Muslim voices in our schools, on the air, it's the same thing that we faced, as a nation when we didn't have female voices. The current Republican Party, particularly the Tea Party, is fanatically involved in people's personal lives and very fundamental Christian, and I wouldn't even call it Christian. It's this weird evangelical kind of move. I think that the current Republican Party is not really the Republican Party, but it's been hijacked by this group that is
the radical, racist, Islamophobic, tea party people.
And not just Islamophobic, but really xenophobic. I mean, basically, they believe in sort of white, middle America, gun-toting. I mean, it's pretty scary. They're seriously racist.
We've seen, certainly how the Muslim Brotherhood, for example, has been portrayed. And I'm glad that NPR will give voice to people, and PBS as well. I'm glad they put Rashid Khalidi on to give his point of view, and people like that, and they will give the kind of the Hamas and Hezbollah view in addition to the Israel view. But
now I'll talk personally as opposed to wearing my NPR hat. It feels to me as though there's a real anti-intellectual move on the part of a significant part of the Republican Party. In my personal opinion, liberals today might be more educated, fair, and balanced than...
I like it when you take your NPR hat off.
Why they are able to look at a situation like what is going on in Egypt and say, oh, the Muslim Brotherhood, they are causing this and they are causing that. But what is your opinion of that whole situation that is going on in Egypt?
Well, to me, this is representative of the thing that I guess I am most disturbed by and disappointed by in this country, which is that the educated so-called elite in this country is too small a percentage of the population, so that you have this very large, uneducated part of the population that carries these ideas. It's much more about anti-intellectualism than it is about political, right? Because a university also, by definition, is considered in this country to be liberal, even though it's not at all liberal. And it's liberal because it's intellectual pursuit of knowledge, and that is traditionally something that Democrats have funded and Republicans have not funded. So particularly Republicans play off of the belief among the general population that most of our funding comes from the government. Very little of our funding comes from the government, but they act as though all of it comes from the government. It's about 10% of the total station economy. Total station economy is about $800 million a year, and about $90 million comes from the federal government.
It's a complicated thing, being both a news organization and having,
having the federal funding.
That's
actually, it must be very difficult, because I mean, it must be an awful temptation to want to just
get rid of it.
say, hey, let me vote for this guy. He likes NPR.
Well, frankly,
You have to walk a bit of a fine line.
it is very clear that we would be better off in the long run without federal funding. And the challenge right now is that if we lost it altogether, we would have a lot of stations to guard.
You say that you think that NPR is best off in the long run if they're not funded by the federal government. How do you see that?
Well,
Is it a matter of independence? Or?
I think we're independents, number one. Number two is our job would be a lot easier if people weren't confused about, because we get federal funding, a lot of Americans, a lot of philanthropists actually think we get most of our money from the federal government, even though NPR, as you know, gets 1% and the station economy as a whole gets 10%.
It's confidence in your heart that with all the donors that are available, if they should, forgive me, they should pull the funding right now that you would survive.
Yes.
Still. Okay.
NPR would definitely survive, and most of the stations would survive.
You're not really supposed to say it, but I mean, I think that really highlights the extent to which, about the Jewish funding that apparently dried up, the extent to which the Jews do kind of control the media. Or at least certainly the Zionists and the people who have the interest in swaying media coverage toward in a favorable direction of Israel. And since Palestine, the Palestinian viewpoint is, again, the red eye. The Palestinian viewpoint, since NPR is one of the few places that has the courage to really present it, there's kind of a joke that we used to call it National Palestinian Radio. I'm not too upset about maybe a little bit less Jewish influence of Jewish money in NPR, but Zionist coverage is quite substantial elsewhere. So. But
I don't actually find it in NPR.
What exactly?
The Zionist or pro-Israel, even among funders.
Nobody really
No.
pro-Israel.
I mean, it's there in those who own newspapers, obviously. But no one owns NPR. So I don't find it.
I just think what Israel does, I don't think can be excused frequently. So I'm glad to hear that.
Even one of our biggest funders, who you'll hear on air, the American Jewish World Service, may not agree with us. I visited them recently. They may not agree with what we put on air, but they find us important to them. And sometimes it's not that easy to hear what we say and what our reporters say, but they still think NPR is important to support.
Right. Well, because I think they're really looking for a fair point of view, and many Jewish organizations are not. And, frankly, many organizations, I'm sure there are Muslim organizations that are not looking for a fair point of view, right? They're looking for a very particular point of view. And that's fine.
We're not one of them.
Right. I'm gathering that you're not, actually.
Our funding comes mostly from a place like the Muslim Brotherhood, but you look at the way that they have been demonized and put down and shown as horrible, terrible people, when they are simply people that are just trying to help. So,
Sadly, our history of Americans, very young society, shown that we've done this before. And we put Japanese Americans in camps in World War II.
And even around the Juan Williams issue, we had a really great discussion with them, and they all agreed in the end, well, of course you have to fire him. But why they won't
He
say
worked for Fox News.
why they
to
won't,
begin
right,
with,
why
so
they won't say that
that's good enough reason, isn't it?
That
in all of the uproar, for example, around Ron Williams. What NPR did, I'm very proud of, and what NPR stood for is non-racist, non-bigoted, straightforward telling of the news. And our feeling is that if a person expresses his or her opinion, which anyone is entitled to do in a free society, they are compromised as a journalist. They can no longer fairly report. And the question that we asked internally was, can Juan Williams, when he makes a statement like he made, can he report to the Muslim population, for example, and be believed? And the answer is no. He lost all credibility, and that breaks your basic ethics as a journalist.
PBN, for news that affects America. Join us on our live show at pushbacknow.com.